Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Glorious Ashes of Creation June development update. We hope that everyone has been well and safe. We know this one's coming a little hot for you. That just means you gotta look on the bright side. You get two in July, technically.
I know this is like a 4th of July stream. We should have had
Oh, we should have fireworks and
yeah,
yeah,
Yes, a
exactly.
celebration.
just explode some money. Obviously, you see a different face here as well. I'm Margaret Crone, your Director of Communications, and with me, as always, is Stephen Sharif, our Creative Director. But we have Brian Langford, who you've seen on the stream
Woo!
before, but he's joining us for this little special
It's
one, and
it's
he's
been a
wearing
little
some
while.
Ashes merch. You're gonna make everyone jelly.
Yes.
Uh,
Looking good.
Yeah, you can see
Well,
some
thank you.
behind him as well. But as a little sneak peek, we are working on merchandise. We know that we've been getting a lot of people asking us for it. It takes time. You have to go through manufacturing and you have to find the right people that you want. You have to get all your designs ready. And then it's back and forth getting
And then you have
samples.
to have our models in-house like Brian that's testing everything.
Yeah, you got to
Yeah.
like
That's right.
pose for us. Um, but yeah, so we'll just get right into all of the goodness. But as you can see below us, what we're going to be covering today is reminders, server meshing technology, studio update, art update, and we'll have some Q&A from the forums. We'll also be pulling some live questions as well, as we usually do after the server meshing technology stuff. So stay tuned for that. But before we begin those things, we have our quick reminders. And the first one here is, of course, our YouTube Spotlight. And if you would like to be spotlighted for our YouTube Spotlight, all you have to do is subscribe to us over on YouTube. Make sure that your subscription shows publicly. It's a little weird thing. And leave a comment on our development update, the full development update. And you could be chosen for next month. So this one is from Kevin, and they would like to know, love the vid. Are there any plans in the future of making skills that require team effort, like 10 summoner players in a guild sacrificing 50% of their HP to summon a giant golem that can break down walls and gates and
Hmm.
sieges, or act as a front to block damage from enemy arrows, maybe 10 mages sacrificing
Mhm.
50% of their mana to cast an ice storm in certain area that significantly reduces movement speed, which it can be used on holding down choke points. That was a
Yeah.
lot. They had some
Oh, yeah.
imagination go into that one.
I mean, regardless of the specific examples there, right?
Mhm.
I think that the crux of the question is, do we intend for there to be synergy between multiple archetypes or different archetypes in skill activation? And I think we've talked about this in the past. We gave an example, actually, I think I heard a golem in this example, but
Yeah.
we gave an example of summoners summoning using combined powers to summon a larger golem. There is a desire to explore that path. I think our ability system facilitates that already. One of the things that we look at, like right now with the current archetypes for A2, there's a wall ability on the tank. It'd be nice that as you're in a party or in a raid, you as a tank have the option to set on that ability whether or not you want that wall to connect with others, so that it snaps to another wall, potentially creating a stronger barrier. Those types of interactions I think are interesting. I think they're cool. I know the combat team thinks they're interesting and cool. We definitely want to aim for that being a potential. Right now, that hasn't yet been implemented, but it is something in the future that I think we're open to and want to explore.
Really awesome. And of
Yeah.
course, we have our dev discussions. We love whenever you all give us your feedback. We're wrapping up the Siege and War one, so if you have any feedback on that one, definitely go over there. But right now we have camera perspectives up, which we want to know about camera perspectives. What camera perspectives do you prefer in terms of both angle and distance from your character? Do you do different situations call for different perspectives? Let us know. And of course, our next one coming up after that will be storytelling with archetypes. And as we've alluded in the past already, there's some Bard action coming up in the future. So we know folks are excited for that coming up.
You know, it's interesting. Sorry, just it reminded me that question.
Mm-hmm.
A game I played a long time ago had these like three different types of wizards. One was wind, one was water, and the other was fire. And they each had an elemental infusion that you could cast on another wizard of a different type.
Oh, I know what
And
game you're
if
talking about.
yeah,
I like that game.
and if you did cast it, there was like a 10 to 20 minute long cooldown on the infusion, but it powered them up to do a mega like nuke, right, on a
Yeah.
target.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't find the efficacy of that, to be anything particularly game changing. It was a kind of nifty gimmick for a single nuke. But like, what did that do in the long run of me constantly casting my normal nuke over and over and over again, right? But I thought it was an interesting attempt at creating some interclass dependencies or synergy from a party perspective with those classes. And if you dive a little bit deeper into that, maybe you can come up with some fun, regular moment to moment gameplay.
100%.
Yeah.
And with that, we move into our server meshing technology. This is going to be a long
Ooh,
1
boy.
hour and 18-minute segment.
Yes.
So buckle in. If I told everybody in the beginning, I was in chat, I was like, get your snacks ready because you're gonna maybe take a pee
For
break
sure.
now.
And as we were talking through this, and Brian and I have talked about this in the past as well, you really kind of have to wonder what segment of our community is interested in this depth of a technical
Clearly, the people that
discussion.
are here, we told
Right.
them in advance
Right.
what's coming. We're like, this is going to
Yeah.
be very nerdy talk. Prepare
It's a super
yourself.
nerd thing. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a super nerd thing. And to be honest with you, it's not what your general population cares to see at all, right? They want to see the gameplay, they want to feel the gameplay, they want to talk about that. And that's like, if you think about the ratio of streams that we do, what is gameplay versus technical discussions?
We do
Maybe it's
mostly
like a 1 to
gameplay, I feel
10,
like.
right? It's like, it's like a
Yeah.
1 to 10, or every 10 or so streams, we have a super in-depth, technical discussion. This one, let me preface, is going to be the most technically oriented discussion we have ever done as a live stream.
Well, we made our lovely Mike Vecchio, our graphics designer,
yeah, it looks
made some
great.
great imagery to help
Oh,
you
I thought it was
understand
phenomenal.
things.
Yeah.
So hopefully
Yeah.
you won't be too bored visually either.
I thought it was phenomenal, but let me just speak to this. There is a lot of magic that goes on behind the scenes of what makes these kinds of games possible.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of individuals who are not the VFX artists, who are not the combat designers, but who are in the literal weeds of the deepest code possible that is so nuanced and complicated that it is, without a degree in this specific field, you really have a very difficult time even following along. So I would just want to give kudos to the guests that we had on this particular live stream, Zach, Hunter, Anton. They did a phenomenal job, I think, even with the visual aid that Vecchio did, which he did a great job with, in kind of walking through from a layman's perspective, just the level of complexity that's necessary, and also the magic that we're brewing up here at Intrepid, because that magic's going to be on full display for Alpha 2. You guys are going to be experiencing it, and without an in-depth showcase like the one you're about to have, you would have no idea of what's going on in the background. It would just feel like seamless gameplay to you. But there is really,
if the PI folks, because the PI folks who joined us for our Node Wars testing even realized what was going on behind the scenes, because the server meshing technology isn't just something we're talking about today. It exists in the game, and they experienced it. So, and
we've been working on for years now, right? So I think they do, because sometimes as an individual server worker might go down, we're like, why did I get disconnected and they didn't get disconnected?
But I don't know if they put 2 and 2 together that it's the same technology for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. So
and these guys were so excited. They were like, we could have talked even longer.
Oh, yeah, for sure. This is total nerdgasm area.
Mm-hmm.
But let me say this. So as a preface, before we get into this is going to be up on YouTube afterwards. We're going to post it there. It's a standalone discussion. Like Margaret said, hour 18 minutes. This is very in-depth technical discussions. We're going to answer some questions afterwards. So make sure you guys are posting. Margaret's going to be watching. Feedback points
necessarily only. We have our wonderful community team and social team that will be grabbing questions from all the places.
Absolutely. So make sure, as you guys are watching this, the types of questions we would love to hear from you is, how are these types of technical discussions received by our audience? Do you enjoy them? Do you like getting a look under the hood? Try to formulate, the types of questions you can better understand it. Margaret and the community team will capture them. We'll answer them afterwards. But please understand, everything here continues to be a work in progress. All of the conversations that we're having about this technology is what's going to be tested as part of Alpha 2. And sit back and enjoy an insight to what most companies really do not ever reveal about what's under the hood.
All right, time to get nerdy. See y'all on the flip side. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our glorious Server Mesh Technology Showcase segment.
Exciting.
It is. I'm Margaret Crone, your Director of Communications. And of course, with me as always is Stephen Sharif, our wonderful creative director.
I'm excited. We have a fun showcase today. I mean, this is something that I don't think a lot of companies go into. A lot of projects don't really talk about, and it can be a little bit on the techie side, but I think this is stuff that a lot of players like hearing about. And I know we got some exciting people to chat with today. What do you think, Margaret?
And of course, we tried to make it as visually appealing as possible. Shout out to Mike Vecchio, as you may know him from all of our other graphics, but he's our graphics designer and he did a wonderful job on these slides. So hopefully they help portray what our wonderful engineering team is trying to showcase. So we will kind of introduce them. We have some new people who you've never met before. We'll kick it off first with Zach. If you want to talk about who you are, what you do at the studio, and maybe a little fun fact.
Hi guys, I'm Zach. I'm the technical director here at Intrepid Studios. I run the networking team and the engine team. I'm generally responsible for performance and making sure that the game scales to the amount of players that we want it to.
A hefty and lofty goal. Many of us players will have thoughts on that. And of course, we have Hunter with us, which some of you, if you hang out on our Discord, maybe have interacted with before.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me. My name's Hunter. I am a game networking engineer at Intrepid Studios. I've been here for almost about 4 years now. And first initially started off as a gameplay engineer, and then I slowly worked my way over to networking because that's what I've come to find that I love, and I love solving the hard problems, and very excited to showcase to y'all what we've been working on.
The gameplay engineering just wasn't torture enough for Hunter, so he wanted to go straight into the fire.
The impossible problems. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my god!
I like solving problems like this, hard problems.
I think solving problems is fun.
To solve.
Yeah. And then of course, last but not least, Anton.
Hello, I'm Anton. I'm a senior networking engineer over here at Intrepid. I moved straight into this position because, I wanted to suffer immediately. I didn't want to start with a gameplay. All
right. Well, let's kick it off, Zach. I think you have a little intro here for us as we move in.
Yeah.
So Zach, just to start, a lot of people, sometimes don't know what networking is.
Yeah.
Talk to us about what is networking. What is a network layer?
At its core, networking is just the concept of moving a state from the server to the clients. That at its core, that is the problem we are trying to solve. We are trying to do that as fast as possible with as many players as possible. Since we are making a very, very large game, we have a lot of problems that most games don't usually have.
Yeah, and with regards to like an MMORPG versus like a peer-to-peer versus like a small dedicated server, like our networking needs are intense because
they're very
types of numbers we're looking at are extreme.
Yeah, everyone on the networking team here has worked on other multiplayer games before, and this is definitely the project where we have to get the most creative with how we are going to solve our scaling problems. Like we are working on an MMO. Most MMOs don't do what we're about to do here. They don't talk about how they, made it so they can support thousands of players per server. So it's very much we have to, kind of like figure out what has been done and do a lot of R&D to figure out what we need to do for our game.
Right. And kind of answering that question of what we need to do for our game starts out with, well, what is our game trying to achieve, right?
Yes. Yeah.
There are a lot of different types of MMOs, some that heavily, utilize instancing,
Yes.
some that, maybe don't care about replicating to hundreds
Yep.
of players at a given time. So first it starts with a vision. What is Ashes
Yep.
of Creation? And then that kind of leads you down the architectural path of,
Yes.
okay, what does that mean we have to set up?
Exactly.
Because this isn't out of the box Unreal Engine 5.
No,
this is a
not even
custom
close.
network layer. Yeah.
Yeah, this is fully custom, tailor-made for the needs that Ashes has. Like, this is not, none of this is off the shelf. None of this is standard Unreal. This is all built for the kind of game that we are making.
Right. And so how do you go about kind of, determining that architecture? What does that look like for a game like Ashes? And we've been working on this for a number of years.
Yeah, for years.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the first step is we need to figure out the requirements. Like, what do we actually need to, what are Ashes requirements? The first place we start is, we're an open world PvP game. So we can't really control where players go. We can't do typical matchmaking where we just, spin up more servers, put them on the new matchmaking servers and, not have these issues. We're an open world game. Anyone can go anywhere. We're a highly PvP game, so we need to have low latency. People can't just, we can't do what other games do, where you just like lower your tick rates really low and then just simulate at a really, really low rate. Since we're, action PvP, we can't do that. One of our, I guess, would you call this a game design pillar, Stephen? Like, this is like that we don't want to do layering. Like, that's a very like
absolutely
game thing. We wanted so like you can go anywhere in the world, stand there, and the people who are there. Like,
yeah. And I was just going to say, like, game layering, obviously everyone on this call is a gamer who's played MMOs, and we played games that do layering.
Yep.
It's just a very different experience when you can switch channels, Yeah, it's like you're switching a different world.
A core like MMO memory for me is like, old WoW. You would go to the same place, like, and there would be the same person there, dancing on top of a mailbox every single time.
Or dancing on top of a corpse and looking at you with hungry eyes.
And they were always there. And they were always there. And with layering, you don't get that. You don't get that same level of experience that we want to give to our players. And then I guess our last requirement, which is like, just a typical MMO requirement, is that we have, very, very high player count goals. And, typically high player count goals with no layering don't really go together. So that's where it comes into like, we need to get really creative with how we're going to solve these problems.
And some of us, Hunter, Anton, we've played these games that have high player counts, but a lot of ways that they get around having higher player counts is by being less server adjudicated, less server authoritative, and more player, which has its own risks and isn't really preserving the integrity of that player experience.
Indeed, like some games do not do proper physics simulations on the server side to validate player movements in order to achieve that kind of thing, which means that like cheaters can have an easier time going through walls and stuff like that. Or I guess they do layering or sharding where they have real high player counts, but technically not really, because they're kind of broken up.
I can't tell you how many times I've jumped into either some session-based game, or I don't want to call any of them out, but where there's just one single player that's either hacking or doing something, and they're just running around and ruining the experience for everyone. And it's because the way they've architected in such a way, it's easier for those types of experiences to occur.
Always trust the client, right?
Exactly.
You just made everyone sweat, Hunter.
Do we want to kind of
Excellent.
transition that into talking about the issues that we are trying to
Yeah.
address?
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Yeah, so I guess the issues start with, it's like, we're making MMO in Unreal. The amount of entities we want on the server, it's just not really going to work with standard out of the box Unreal replication and Unreal simulation. So there are two problems here. It's like, okay, even if we could fit all the players we want on a single server, you know, we still can't replicate them because those are two separate problems. We have the simulation and then the replication problem. So since this is a problem, and there is no standard Unreal solution for this, we had to go about making our own custom solution to solve these problems. And this is where IntrepidNet, I guess, was born. IntrepidNet is a fully distributed networking stack. It's tailor-made for Ashes of Creation, fully built in-house. None of this is off-the-shelf technology. It's all custom built for our game. We'll get into these more in a bit, but IntrepidNet is made up of quite a few different technologies. The one that people are most interested in, people are always talking about, is server meshing. We'll talk a lot about server meshing and how we implemented it for our game. We have inter-server replication, which is we have multiple servers and they're replicating to each other. How do we deal with that problem? We have our own microservice layer for servicing our communication, I guess, between our servers. We have dynamic gridding, which is very exciting, and you guys will like a lot.
Very
and then we have the
exciting.
replication graph, which is just more custom replication. I would almost call them formulas for our game. So we'll be going into all of this. This is very detailed, very tech heavy. So
Strap
need a
in,
theme.
buckle in.
Yeah, we need some like theme music for the IntrepidNet logo there too.
I know they were so excited when Mike made a logo. They're like, "It has
yeah, I
a
was like, oh, it's so
logo."
nice of a logo.
I'm just
Love
thinking of like the Indiana Jones theme song right now. Just-
da, 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 da. Yeah,
Right.
Totally.
So where do we start off with this?
Yeah, so I'm going to kick it over to Hunter, and he'll kind of like start with giving some of the base knowledge for like how Unreal works, and then he'll start with talking about how some of our server technology, our server meshing technology works.
Yeah, hello. So before we start diving too deep into IntrepidNet, there's probably a few terminologies that we wanted to preface with, just so that it helps the community and everyone else here follow along better with like the lingo and the terminology that we will be using. The first concept that we wanted to touch on is an actor. In Unreal Engine, you can think of an actor as like almost any physical representation of an object or an entity that's inside the world. As you can see on the photo, an actor can be anything, such as an NPC, a mount, a tent, a piece of cargo. Pretty much anything that you can visually see and represent is what we call an actor. And these actors, they can be replicated, which we'll get into on the next slide.
And PC would be a player character, for
Yes.
those who don't know. Right.
Personal caravan.
So touching on replication here, replication is a term you might often hear in networking. I believe Zach touched upon that a little bit briefly in his introduction. Replication is the process of synchronizing some sort of state. You can think of it like a value or a property that's on an actor on the server. And then it's synchronizing that state from the server to all the clients that are relevant to the said actor. This is important because of a concept called server authoritative networking. The server, when you think of like networking in video games, the server normally has authority over your game world. And the properties, they're normally updated and checked against the server, which can then be shared and synchronized between your clients, which is through the form of replication. This is also part of why you never want to trust the client, as we said earlier, because when networking, when the client does some action to the server, for instance, you always want to verify that action on the server in some way or shape, or that's how you can get hackers or cheaters or something disrupting your game, because they're able to just send anything they want to the server, and your server will just trust it without verifying. And then that's where you can get the concept of, like I said, hacking and or cheating. So as long as the server kind of holds your source of truth, the client sends the data that your server doesn't agree with, you can decline the actions and or kick or ban the user depending on how severe the action is they're taking that you're not trying to allow.
And obviously we've seen, a lot of games that we've played in where as the latency becomes worse for certain players, or as the load on the server becomes higher to process, that replication can show some weird effects in games, right? Where, wait a minute, what's that person doing? That doesn't look right.
Yep, that's typically when you would get like rubber banding, like if your servers really slow down, because you would only get an update every, X period of time.
Yeah, so as you can kind of see in the video we showed, you can kind of see like player 1 is going into the water. This is from the perspective of the server. So as player 1 enters the server, it'll be like, okay, player 1 is swimming. So now player 2 and 3, since they're visually seeing player 1 swimming, they're going to get a state for player 1 saying they are swimming, and then that can kind of perform like the necessary actions of like seeing them play the swim animation or whatnot.
Yeah. And like, I guess to add on to what Hunter is saying, this is pretty much the entire problem. Like, you're doing this all the time for everything in the game that's replicated all the time.
Every movement, every ability, everything you click on, interact with, touch.
Yeah, all the goblins that are running around, they're playing animations, the players moving stuff in their inventories, the
trees, leaves moving subtly.
Well,
in the wind.
yeah, the trees falling, being cut down, yeah.
So not everything needs to be replicated across the server, right? Some things can be client only, like the ways the leaves might move specifically. But when the tree gets cut down, that needs to get replicated across.
Yeah. Well, and you can do interesting things to try and like reduce this problem. Like if we're talking about the wind, for example, you can just replicate, the wind direction and speed.
Yes.
And then the client can just apply that to all the trees instead of you having, a specific replicated, wind and speed for each tree, for example.
Right. And that's part of the finesse of replication, right?
Yeah,
trying to identify.
Reducing the problem. Yeah.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah, a big part of our job, especially with working with gameplay, is trying to figure out how to make that as efficient and optimized as possible so that our game and servers can perform to the expectations we need.
And speaking of servers, server meshing, what everyone's been excited to talk about.
Right. So now we do replication. So now, originally, we just talked about how replicating a one server works. So now the first part of IntrepidNet is what we would like to call, what we basically normally know as server meshing. In Unreal Engine, your game normally works under a single process server scenario. That means all your clients are connected to a singular server that runs the entire game. Now, for an MMORPG like Ashes of Creation, this can't work for us, like for a few reasons Zach talked about in the previous slide. There's just, with the mass amount of entities and actors we have, simulating and processing the replication of all that for every actor in one server, that's pretty insane. Our solution, first and foremost, here is basically we had to modify Unreal Engine so that it is capable of having many server processes that are kind of meshed together or quilted together that allows us to use all these servers together to make up your whole entire game world or your game realm. This allows us to split up that simulation work between many of the server processes, and each server process has its own authoritative state of the world that it kind of owns and controls. This task, it was not a trivial task, and it required us ripping apart deep layers of Unreal Engine and their networking stack in order to really modify it to fit the architecture that we have really envisioned. Outside of this too, there's like a lot of proprietary programs as well that we made that kind of run in the background to help it orchestrate all this functionality as well. And by using Unreal Engine's API, in doing all this, we were also able to add a lot of minimal overhead for our engineers when developing for this solution, and it allows us general control over like how things replicate and where they replicate that we'll get into in the next few slides. So right now you see we have like the static dynamic world grid. Okay, that's great. But now you're probably thinking, okay, now that we stitch many servers together, what is my experience like that in regards to traversing the world? Will I be able to see into the other servers from mine, or will I randomly just start seeing actors pop in and out of existence right in front of me? That kind of takes us to this slide. So our answer to that, of course, is we want to make this experience as seamless as possible for our players. If you cannot tell what's going on behind the scenes and everything that we are making, then that means we did our job right. If you can tell, then it probably means something's wrong and we need to look at what we're doing here and how we can improve and optimize it further. We've developed what we call here inter-server replication for this case, which means that instead of traditional replication, as we explained, was like server to clients, this is basically representing between servers now, or replication between servers. And we do this replication to what we call a proxy actor. As you can see in the video here, we can see there's like a transparent white wall going across the screen. That represents our in-game debug tools with our border regions being drawn. You can see that Vexilent is on one server, and then Kevin is on another one as he's on the other side of that border. So what Vexilent is seeing right now is actually not Kevin, but a proxy of Kevin is what we have deemed it.
Is it really Kevin?
Yeah, who knows?
If only we could actually duplicate Kevin.
Hunter, expand a little bit on, a lot of people who obviously aren't familiar with game development, they might not understand the terminology of debugging tools, right? So to talk a little bit about what a debug tool is.
Right. So when making a networking solution as complicated as this, we need a lot of information about the state of the world, what's happening, where things are going on. So we've developed a lot of like debugging tools that can be used inside the game and outside of the game, which these tools kind of help us collect that information, see where all the important things are happening, see where a failure might be going on. So in this particular instance, we have a debug tool that's in game that allows our developers to kind of draw these server borders so that you can kind of see while you're playing, like, okay, there's a border here. And then if QA is testing something, they can be like, okay, we transferred across the server and then this broke. So that means something's probably wrong with the server transfer. So that can kind of just help you like narrow down more of the problem space and give you that necessary information of like what was going on at the time. Because without that, if we have it turned off, you pretty much hopefully should not be able to tell the difference between the proxy we talked about or the actual actor. You can kind of think of the proxies here as a puppet. Any actual action that was done by the actual actor on its own like authority server, which is the server that owns it, it's then replicated to this proxy on your server, which then gets replicated to yourself, so that you can kind of see the representation of Kevin as if he was on the same server as you. We do it in a form of like, we call it lightweight because it's an up-to-date copy of the original actor, but we can our developers can specifically control like what does and doesn't get sent to this actor so that we're more optimal in like what we're sending, how we're sending it, and when we're sending it. Whew, that was a mouthful.
So now I think the other thing, to think about, Hunter, Zach, Anton, is that not a lot of players obviously follow development of the games that they're excited about, right? They wait until the game is ready to play and marketing begins and they can join in and purchase or whatever. Obviously, Ashes has followed a little bit of a different path where we're giving people a bit of insight into what it actually takes to make these types of games. And we generally tend not to delve too deeply into the highly technical components of our development process because that's where a little bit of a cliff starts to form of player interest, even viewership interest, because it's nice to have the magic work in the background, and you don't necessarily care or want to know how or why it's working, just that it feels good, that it's responsive, and that, it accomplishes from a gameplay loop perspective what you're expecting it to. But, because of the level of complexity, because of the amount of effort, because of what we're trying to create is a next generation level of complexity of gaming, we feel it's important to provide you guys an opportunity to get some insight into what we're doing that's unique, into what we're doing that is going to service a long-term MMORPG at the scale that we need Ashes to be. And that requires some really smart people in the room who are creating proprietary technology that allows us to achieve that in a way that presents players with a game at the quality they expect. And so, I think this is a lot of fun to kind of, have you guys come and explain this front facing. It can be a mouthful, it can be a head full to kind of digest, but at the same time, I know we're nowhere near done. But at the same time, it gives you now an opportunity to really see how the sausage is made.
Right.
And I think that's cool.
Right.
Yeah.
I could talk about this all day.
People don't talk about this. There are so many games that are doing things like this. Not exactly, but like, there are other games that have to solve these problems, and
Yes.
other games don't talk about this. This is a first.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So as you see in the video, you can see into the other server. But now you're probably thinking, okay, what if I want to interact with this proxy? How do I do that across the server boundary? Well, because the proxy is like a puppet controlled by the higher authority, we basically just now need events that we can send from the proxy up to its authority. And then we tell the authority that we want to modify data or execute some action on the authority server so that it can then replicate down to the proxy and then back to you. We have what we call a cross-server event or an inter-server event that's done through what's normally known as an RPC or remote procedure call, which allows pretty much just for this. Our goal with IntrepidNet is to make all the routing and the actions that we do as fast as possible so that we can keep the latency and interactions between servers a pretty seamless experience. And you hopefully shouldn't even be able to tell the difference between, like I said, a proxy or an authoritative actor.
Yeah, and I guess to add here, this is so important because these server borders that we're talking about, they're invisible. You won't know where they are. So I think the big important thing here is like we need to make it so PvP can happen on these borders without people noticing. And that's really the real crux of it here. That's why it has to be so fast.
Right. And as you can see in like the video here, we have some fighting across the border. You can see while we're fighting kind of over the boundary, combat and everything seems pretty seamless and smooth as you would expect it without any noticeable issues. This is kind of showcasing like what we can do with just those events and that replication we talked about. We can have these like in-depth battles or interactions between the servers with hardly any downside.
Yep.
So what we're trying to achieve here is the seamless experience that you hopefully can't tell where that border crossing is.
And the other important thing about this particular, this cross-server information and the border itself, which I think you guys are getting into a little bit later, is that these borders are not static. They can change. They are dynamic.
You're spoiling it, Steven.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This is my first time seeing the slide. Okay, go. No, go. I'm sorry.
I think you were talking about seamless transition, so we can move into that.
Yeah.
So if you look in, or go back one more, Maggie, I'm sorry. So if you kind of see in the video there as well, now that we can kind of do interactions to the proxies across the border, you may have noticed in the video, I did charge myself across the border, and then I basically attacked what we call the proxy of Kevin. However, during that charge, we did basically a server promotion that took place behind the scenes that you probably didn't notice. So if we go to the next slide, we can kind of see now we're introducing the concept of server transfers. This is kind of where IntrepidNet gets very complex. This allows us to not only share and split the statically defined server areas, but we can also transfer actors to new server areas that are moving across the world or happen to have a new server come up on top of it into a different server. And then this allows us to do basically that global load balancing across the realm. And then, so basically when a player or an actor is within range of this border, our system on the back end kind of begins a negotiation and the creation of a proxy so that it can replicate it to the nearby server. This doesn't only happen on like a 1x1 scenario that you might see here. Even if it's a 2x2 when you're in like the corner of 4 different servers, your proxy will then be replicated to on 3 different servers from the one authority. So that way, no matter where you are, whichever server you're in around that area, you'll still be able to see this actor on a different server. If that actor then fully crosses the border, going outside of the authority region of the server it's currently in, the 2 servers then kind of start negotiating what we call a promotion or a transfer. This is when now server A is passing over that authority we previously defined to server B. And then promotions, they're like a whole different beast. In order to do a lot of like the promotions, there's a couple things we have to do, such as like ensuring first you have to ensure the actor is like fully made with all of its components and children. We have to ensure they're all up to date with the entire state that was deemed necessary for the new copy to have, because we don't want to lose any data during this entire transfer.
And Hunter, people hear the term like, children and the state and whatnot. Elaborate a little bit about, what that means at a high level.
Right. So when we have all these entities, such as like an actor, actors can then have on them what we call components, which is basically building blocks that you can then add to your actor that kind of make up the actor, what it does, how it's supposed to act, things like that. So for example, you could have like an actor and then that actor has an interactable component. So that means you can interact with this actor, or it could have an inventory component. So that means, okay, this actor has something of like a bank or it stores goods.
And to contextualize that, let's say, you have your mount out, you're not on your mount, right? But
Right.
another player could walk up to your mount and they would be prompted with an interact that says to mount your mount. As you're moving across the boundary, that actor has that component that is the interactable component that needs to go with it.
Yes.
Right, because if you transfer this actor or you're proxying it, you still need to be able to do that interaction across the boundary. So we proxy that interaction component. And just like we can do cross-server events on the actor itself, we can also do them at the component level, so that way it can communicate with its authoritative one. Because we kind of treat the proxies as like a read-only concept. So the proxies are just visually kind of representing what the authority represents. So any data modifications or anything that has to happen at the authoritative level, so that way then the proxy can get updated appropriately across any server. That's kind of how we have like that central truth of the actor is whatever server it's authority on. And there's only ever one copy of that.
I just want you to know, this conversation so far has probably induced about 30 to 50 people now wanting to take computer science degrees.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, no, it's pretty cool stuff. It definitely took a lot of time and a lot of effort to try to figure out how we make these things possible. And after all this work, we're excited to be able to show it.
Although watching Kevin run back and forth is making me a little nauseous.
Yeah. So in the scenarios too, this also works where you may not be proxying to that nearby server because say you teleport across the map. This kind of means that when promoting there, it kind of does the same exact route, except it may just need to make your actor instead of making a proxy of it. So it all falls kind of under the same generalized system.
Yep.
And then when we normally do have that proxy actor on the other server, that means when you're promoting, we can reuse your existing 2 actors that are from server A and server B, your authority and the proxy. And we can convert that proxy to the authority and then demote the authority one to a proxy. So this allows us more to have that more seamless experience when you're swapping servers. So that way it's a lot faster. You don't need to send a lot more data to copy over to be created. And then there's not really any visual hitching at all when this happens, because we're not spawning or destroying a new one on the fly during that promotion.
And this helps also with client performance.
It can. Not going too into detail, but
Yeah.
We'll talk
actors
also.
actors
no,
really
go
aren't cheap. So replicating an actor can be expensive, and every new actor you kind of open and close to the client, which is basically like a create or a destroy. That just adds this additional overhead that we didn't want. So we can kind of negate it by just reusing the existing one we already have, and then doing that swap. So that way you don't even notice anything happened. Because
You were
we
about
try
to ask
to.
something, Steven.
No, he got it on the spawn and destroy.
Nice.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I said, our goal is to make it as seamless as possible, and one of the main pillars when we were making this entire system was we try not doing anything on the client. If all of our actions are kind of done on the server in a fast and efficient way, the client shouldn't notice anything happening at all. And that's kind of where this comes in, because we don't want the client to notice. So every time we're doing something, we're like, okay, how can we do this without affecting the client's experience? Because we don't want them to have a bad time.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how all this stuff is working. Because yeah, we are communicating between servers, we're sending events between servers, we are transferring between servers, but how is that information flowing? How do the clients end up seeing that stuff? And typically, the way this is done is you create a centralized replicator, and all the different servers from all across the realm send all the relevant information about all the different entities to that replicator. So let's say one server has a bunny, and that bunny moved around. It sends that information to the replicator. Another server has a goblin that took damage. It will send that information to the replicator. And then all the players will connect to that replicator, and the replicator will parse through all those different entities, decide which players should see which entities, and send that information to the specific player. However, this creates a few issues, and you might actually be able to see it from that graph there that we've just created a bottleneck. As this singular process now may need to keep track of hundreds of thousands of entities and send potentially hundreds of millions of updates to all those clients, because all those bunnies moving and the goblins and the players and the trees falling, all that information has to be passed through the replicator and then sent to each individual client.
And I guess something to add here too, Anton, is like that would just be moving the problem. We're trying to like if we had a single server, this would be the same problem, where all the replication is happening on one place, and we're trying to not do that.
Yes, actually, we tested a solution like this during Alpha 1, and this bottleneck, it kind of affects how many players you can have in the realm as a total. Like, you can spawn all the servers you want, but at some point you hit a limit on the replicator itself, and it doesn't matter how many more servers you spawn. You are limited by that cap on the replicator. During Alpha 1, the number we got was like, I think, about 1,000 players, where after hitting that point, you can no longer really scale anymore.
And it's important to note that because of this more, I guess, for lack of a better term, archaic and monolithic approach, which many of us have likely experienced in older games, there are certain scenarios in those games that are multiplayer where you start to see that server is having trouble. And it's because it's hitting these types of choke points.
Yes, and in fact, when this replicator is overwhelmed, the entire realm will lag. It doesn't matter if you're alone in one server in a remote island, you will lag because there is a big battle on the other side of the realm.
I remember in so many games where I would be out hunting and peaceful, nobody's nearby, and I'm noticing everything is starting to churn. And I'm like, what is going on? And then I'll look into global chat and I'll see, oh shit, they're having a huge fight somewhere across the realm in a totally different part of the world, and I am suffering as a result of it.
Yeah.
Indeed.
I
And
guess
basically,
I guess
yeah.
that's a good bridge to art to what we're doing.
yeah, it is a pretty good bridge because basically we Ashes of Creation is trying to aim for player counts that we found out that centralized replicator does not support. So we had to come up with our own solution, and this is, from what we know, not a very common solution, possibly because it's more difficult to pull off. What we basically did is we completely got rid of that centralized replicator, and instead we had the servers themselves collaborate with the other servers around them and exchange information that way. That makes each individual server have all the data they need to serve the clients that are connected to them. In our scenario over here, you can see we have 4 servers and 2 clients are connected to each one of those servers. If we had a centralized replicator, all those 4 servers would be connected to that one replicator, and then all 8 clients would be connected to that one replicator too. So we've actually distributed the problem, we've eliminated the bottleneck, and we've also eliminated this one point of failure that existed beforehand, where if that one replicator fails, the entire realm goes down. And we can actually, have a look at the next slide where we see how we are more fault tolerant than if we have a centralized replicator. And we can actually, you can swap to the next slide. There you go. We have the entire server grid over there. And if one server goes down, everyone else can keep playing it like normal. We patch that server up, we fix the issue, we bring it back up, and everyone else never experienced anything. The players that were connected to that one server got booted and then can rejoin just fine. If we had a centralized replicator, if that replicator went down, everyone gets booted. So, yeah. So that's another good benefit from our approach. Although the really big gain we achieved with this was the elimination of the bottleneck, and it actually lets us scale. We are truly distributed. We can just spawn new servers to a certain point, of course.
And this is not, and by the way, Anton, like, this is not just a strength, obviously, of the replication model of the server grid itself, being distributed in such a good way.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have to bring such a monolithic server down because of, let's say, whatever error you can't determine, that has a cascade effect across, everything. You're having to affect the database, to affect the login servers, to have the player queues going off again. The ability for this to truly be distributed and for us to be fault tolerant is an entirely different player experience when it comes to these large, massive MMORPG type settings.
Yeah, I mean, it's very typical, like with, an MMO, like that something else is happening in the world somewhere, someone's hacking, someone's, there's a really large raid or siege happening, and the server falls over, and then everyone gets kicked. With our model, that doesn't happen. The rest of the server is fine, performance is still fine in the rest of the server, people can keep playing. If that server goes down, we'll deal with it, we'll spin it back up, and it will just seamlessly rejoin the grid once we're back in a good state.
And this, eliminating the replicator was definitely not easy, and it caused us quite a few problems. But let's investigate one of those problems and the solutions we came up to solve it. So because we did not want to create an really large connection network between all the different servers. We essentially connect the servers to the nearby servers, the neighboring, or like some that are close by. And that is fine in most situations. Over here, we can see there's two players in two neighboring servers. Those servers communicate. So if those two players are in a party, even though they might be a little bit too far away to see each other, they can still see each other on the map. However, in a more complex situation where that other player is maybe on the other side of their realm, now those servers do no longer have a connection, a direct connection to each other. So we have created a problem. How can player 1 see player 2 when player 2 is on the other side of the world? If we had a centralized replicator, sure, we have the data just there, we can figure it out, but we do not. What do we do about that? And to solve that issue, we created a concept called microservices. Microservices are, imagine them kind of like servers on top of the servers, like some database, for example, but it's active. It's not just storage, they're doing work. We have a node service that is responsible for leveling up and keeping track of all the nodes and the upgrades that have to be done to nodes. We have a population service that is doing the spawning across all the realms. And we have a social service, which would be, for example, what would affect the party example that we just talked about. This means that server 1 and server 8 on the diagram can connect to that social service and exchange the locations of those two players. That way, player 1 and player 8 can have exactly the information they need to be able to see each other on the map. And yep. What was it, Stephen?
Oh, nope, that wasn't me.
Oh, that wasn't you. Okay, sorry, my bad. And this actually gave us some extra benefits. We were able to make some pretty cool tools with it because we wanted to be able to have like an overview of what happens to the entire realm. We wanted to be able to keep track of all the players, all the NPCs, see all the different gatherables being spawned, see all the trees. And that's kind of hard to do if we just connect to a single server and then see what's on that one server and then jump on another server and see what's there. So we created a service that keeps track of all entities in the world and a tool that can allow us to view those entities. And this is a pretty cool tool because we can see the players moving around, we can see them participate in events, we can see the NPCs dying, we can see them collect gatherables. So if there's any issue with the spawning of gatherables, we'll detect it and hopefully fix it. It's really cool.
I think the big thing to say here is like, we can see the entire world state, which we generally can't do because we're so distributed and everything's so server central. But since we have these services, we can make a debug service like this, and we can see the entire world.
Yeah,
yep,
I'm always watching you.
Yeah, I also wanted to piggyback off of that, Anton, of your services. The services as well are also pretty much distributed, like going for our model, so that if one of those systems go down, it's not taking down the every game system. So if the chat service goes, or the social service, for example, goes down, you may just not be able to chat or form a party for a few minutes until it comes back up, but you should still be able to interact with like your guild, your node, your mail, etc. And we tried making the services as well fault tolerant, like we explained earlier. So that way they can come back up, go down, come back up on the fly, get hot fixed. And so that we can still provide that seamless experience while the feature may not be working, everything else should still be working in the meantime.
Right, and because they're componentized in this, microservices approach, right? There is not an interconnectivity where you have one failure in a single service causes a cascading effect across all of
Yeah,
those services, right?
exactly.
They're independent of one another. That allows for a recovery time, a recovery process
Yeah,
to stand back up while the other services continue their operations.
exactly.
And then these debugging tools allow us to see where those problem areas are, or
Yeah.
what situation or actor might be causing a problem, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't
exactly.
have all the tools, a slide for all the tools, but we do have monitoring tools for all the different services. We know when they're lagging, we know when they're down, we can monitor pretty much everything. It's pretty cool.
Yes, it's very cool. Cool. Now let's get into the really fun stuff now.
Yeah,
I know
let's
this
get
next
into
one
this
is
one.
this one is
The
something
really
that
fun
the
stuff.
community has actually been talking about quite a bit.
Yeah,
too.
I saw a bunch. I saw a bunch of videos. People have been talking a lot about this.
Yeah.
So go into it, Anton, because this is your thing.
Yeah. Oh God, I've been looking forward to, like, since I joined the company, I've been wanting to implement this. And this is an answer to a problem. And that problem that it's trying to answer is, sure, you have all those different servers, but usually player activity tends to condense to certain areas. Let's say a large PvP battle is happening at some place. And when that happens, that one server can be overwhelmed. And you usually wouldn't want to just create tiny servers for everything, because that can be incredibly expensive and wasteful. But having those smaller servers would be really useful. So what if you can do it dynamically? What if you can detect when a server is overwhelmed and then split it? This is what dynamic gridding is. And it can be a little bit tricky to implement. The difficulty of it is that you just now split a server and you want the players to not realize. There were casting abilities, they were running around, and a new server just spawned, they were moved there, and no one realized.
Yeah.
That is the difficulty there.
And something I want to add here is, like,
Yeah.
these cases in which we're splitting a server, they're complex, because if we're splitting a server, there's a lot going on. So
Yes.
it's not like we can, like, there's just a couple people, we can split them, we can do like a quick fade, and it will be fine. If we're splitting a server, it's because it's under load, and, and there's a lot of action going on. So we want to keep that action going on and not interrupt it while we balance the load across multiple servers.
And it's important to, call back again to the very beginning of this conversation, right? How do you determine the types of architecture necessary? You must first understand what is the mission statement of the game. And Ashes is built with a lot of open world, dynamic and emergent player behaviors that are attempting to encourage high player densities at any point within the open world locations, which makes this particular problem a requirement when determining architecture of how do we address this, right? And I'm not familiar with, and Zach, Anton, Hunter, I'm not sure if you guys are, but I'm not familiar with any other tech stack or networking approach that has a dynamic gridding solution in order to better accommodate and facilitate that emergent player density behavior.
Yeah, I mean, we are not the first people to try this. This is something that a lot of people have tried. It is the answer to scalability if you can get it right, and that is that is our mission here, is to get this right. We want to be the people that solve this problem, and because if we solve this, the level of battles and dynamicism, I guess, we'll be able to have in Ashes is going to be unparalleled to any other game.
Yeah, and to make something clear, we're not talking about the far future 5 years from now. This is currently in development, and we are hoping at least to have it available by Alpha 2.
And the server meshing part of it is already in game. Right?
Yeah, so the
dynamic aspect of it.
So the static part, is already going.
Yeah, it's been going for many months now.
Yeah, years now. And all of our dev test servers, people are on them every day running it. It's fine. This is like, where we're investing our dev time right now, is getting this perfect.
Hmm.
getting this ready for the entrance of Alpha 2.
Yes.
And hopefully, Ashes of Creation is going to be the first game that implements this technology and actually deploys it.
Yes.
That would be really fun.
You got to
This is
work
exciting.
quickly, guys, if you want that. Moving.
Very cool. This is exciting.
Right, do we
Yeah,
want to talk
I
about the
I think I'll
server
pass it up
scalability?
to Hunter. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess now that we've, all these slides before this, we were talking about distributing the problem, separating the problem into multiple servers, so we don't have to deal with thousands and thousands of players and on the same server doing replication. But we still have like the core problem here, right? We can only split servers so far. We can't, make them like 10 meters by 10 meters. We can't do that. It's going to be too small. So we need to still support, a high
You get a
number.
server. You get a server.
Exactly. So we still need to solve the core problem of how many players can we get on a server, have them replicate and simulate at the same time. So I'll pass it over to Hunter, and he'll kind of go into I guess the problems that we have when we're with Unreal Replication and how we've gone about speeding them up so we can support many hundreds of players on a server.
Yeah. So kind of piggybacking off what Zach said, like, what do we do when a large amount of players are, say, following your favorite streamer into a small area, and then we can't just keep dividing our servers into such tiny areas, and that you're needing a single server that's still of a reasonable size to then be able to process the heavier load and replication that's happening in that exact area at that exact moment. So in order to do that, we have to then figure out how we can increase the number of players and entities that a single server can support. And doing so will also help us increase our overall concurrent user limits per realm. Because as a rough napkin math, of course, you take the players per server, multiply that by the number of servers, and there's your CCU, right? It's that easy.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Obviously. So I'm going to kind of go into now, we're going to touch back up on kind of what we explained earlier, why is replication expensive? What's going on? So we kind of wanted to explain that, on this slide here, for example, you can see an example of a CPU performance profile that we took during a large-scale bot test. You can see here that the single frame we're staring at took 150 milliseconds, for example. Now, 150 milliseconds may not seem like much, but when you want to, for example, you're talking about servers and tick rates, and if you're trying to target, say, a 30 or 60 frames per second or ticks per second server, you only get a budget of about 33 milliseconds or 16 milliseconds per frame in order to keep that stable high tick time.
Can you talk a little bit about what you're referring to when you're talking about tick rates and ticks? People might not be familiar with that.
So as your game server runs, it runs and processes basically the entire world at an interval of ticks, or frames is what it's called. The faster you can do all that processing, the faster your gameplay and experience is going to be. If you're targeting, say, roughly 30 to 60 frames per second, which is a pretty good targets to have for a game server of an MMO that needs to be very fast paced and have very good performance.
And server
and detection.
FPS is different than client FPS.
Yes, but they're
because people might be like
coupled.
30 is not acceptable.
No,
so I just want to make that
so
clear.
they're vaguely coupled.
Yeah.
So one of the things you would notice, if server performance went down, is you would notice rubber banding, when you see people just jumping around the world, or you would notice your latency goes up, and you would notice that by you're trying to do PvP and you feel and you cast Fireball and you feel the latency between the time you casted it and when it actually executed on the server.
Right.
So this time, these tick times that we're talking about, that's what it correlates to for the player.
Right, because normally when you do an action, the client triggers something, it tells the server, hey, do this, and the server then replicates back to your client. If these frames are taking a long time to process in between, that means your server just has artificial latency and it's taking a lot longer to then process that incoming message. to then return back to you. So like in this 150 millisecond scenario, if our game was steadily running every frame at like 150 milliseconds of time to process, that would drop our server down to roughly like 6 ticks or 6 frames per second, which then you will really heavily around that time start feeling like latency, rubber banding, dropped packets, etc.
And that's not acceptable for an action combat PvP MMO. Like, it just doesn't work.
Right. So
I've played those games. It definitely doesn't work.
We all have blamed lag before, right?
Yeah.
Right?
So we know that this is unacceptable. What do we have to do to optimize this?
Right. So now this kind of tells us replication, and now it's like, okay, let's dive a bit deeper into why this replication is very expensive. One of the big major factors replication can be slow is because first, when you want to do your replication, you have to gather and determine basically relevancy of every actor in the game to not only your connection, but every other connection that's being processed in that frame. So relevancy is used and needed to determine basically how far away an actor is from your player. And then there might be some other some other checks that they may need to do, like is it visible or not? But for simplicity's sake, we're just going to base it off a distance for now. So then it's basically comparing that distance to you and saying, okay, are you eligible for me to replicate to you? Because we obviously don't want things being considered to replicate to you if it's like across the world. Like, you don't care what's happening on the far northern end of the continent while you're all the way down on the southern end. Like, that's just going to waste a lot of processing and bandwidth. So the relevancy checks, like, this gets way more expensive the more players and more actors you have that are replicated, because then it's for every actor, for every player, am I within range of them?
Yeah, and when we're talking about an MMO, where you're gonna have thousands of players on the server, thousands of NPCs, tens of thousands of replicated actors, you just can't check you can't do a distance check on all of those things in a reasonable amount of time.
Right. And so this is an optimization here for networking purposes, but it also leads to then slowing down your CPU resources, because again, you have to do that like every tick or at every whatever interval you set to do these checks. If we looked at the previous example, for example, I believe I don't think it shows in the profile, but roughly a little bit over 1/3 of that total time in that profile was just doing the relevancy checks. A good thing about our model, though, because all of our servers are distributed, they only have to do those relevancy checks for just everything within that then distributed zone. As of if we had that central replicator, that replicator would then have to still process every single player, every single actor, etc. in the world in some way, shape, or form to then determine if it should be relevant to you or not. So by splitting up and doing the distributed server load like we're doing, this allows us then to kind of reduce that problem area, but it's still a problem.
It's still really big.
It's still a really big problem. Now, adding more servers to the solution, that can make it smaller and smaller, but eventually there's we want to get it as fast as possible. So it's like, how do we make this better? How do we make this faster?
To be clear, that profile was using it had a server meshing, and it still was 35% relevancy checks. So we need to reduce those relevancy checks. How do we do that? How can we tell Unreal not to do all those unnecessary checks? Well, Unreal in recent years introduced something called the replication graph, and that is something that gives the developers the ability to write a custom solution into how to handle all those relevancy checks and how to determine which players should see which actors when it comes to replication. And it can actually lead to some really great performance gains. We'll look at it in a bit. But let's start and see how we use this replication graph to solve specifically this relevancy check. On the map over there, we see you still cannot see too far away, but there are a couple actors that are really close to the player, that goblin over there and a loot box. And there is also a bear a little bit on a medium distance away and a bunny really far away. Now imagine that keeps stretching for 500 meters more and there's 200 more bunnies. And without the replication graph, we would have to check every single one of those bunnies and say, is this within my distance? Is this within my distance? And that's a problem. That's expensive to do. So what we're going to use the replication graph to do is we are going to create this grid where we eliminate all the cells that are far further away from us and only check the nearby cells. That allows us to only check these 3 actors that are around us, skipping potentially hundreds of other actors that are further away. And this can lead to a pretty big performance improvement. We noticed, and this is like highly varying depending on the scenario, of course, but on an average scenario, we noticed about a 1.5 times performance improvement, like a 35% reduction in our replication costs. This is pretty good, but it's still not fast enough. And if we analyze the problem a little bit, we'll see that we're talking and thinking about like the NPCs and the bear and the goblin, but we are also comparing our distance with all the trees, with all the bushes that you can pick up, with potentially some buildings that are destructible. Why are we doing that? Can we do something to improve this? And the answer is yes, we can. What we can do is we can monitor and see when these ores or these trees are changing. And when they're not changing, we can move them out of our grid. So we're not even considering them at all. We might have 2,000 trees in the area. Well, we're not even going to look at them because none of those trees just got cut down. If someone is cutting them down, then yes, we're going to move them temporarily into the special grid. And then once they're done cutting out and everyone sees that they were cut down, we put them back to the dormancy bucket. It's essentially, you can imagine like the actors going to sleep for a little bit. And this gives us a really, really large improvement. We noticed in our tests about 5 times improvement in replication times. So far, if we also include the previous optimizations, we've improved our replication performance by 7 times. And yet that's still not fast enough. It's still not fast enough, mainly because of our worst case scenario. And that worst case scenario is people keep packing in that one small area. There's an event happening, there's some point they need to capture, 200 people run in the same area. Yes, you can ignore the relevancy to some faraway tree. That's great. That's again, that's more than welcome. But if 200 players can see each other, that means that 200 times 200, you're sending 40,000 updates per tick.
Yeah.
And
I guess one thing to add there, Anton, is this is typically when a game would introduce a new layer or a new shard. This is like typically that case. But as we talked about earlier, one of our goals is we don't want to do layering. We don't want to do sharding. We want everyone who's in the same area to be able to see each other.
Right, and you could then use like dynamic greeting to help in this scenario, but again, we can only make the servers so small and dynamic before we kind of run out of that room, so we still have to improve the scenario that's kind of happening around you.
Indeed. So we need to figure out a way to further improve this worst case scenario. And this is where we kind of hit an engine limit. And this engine limit is that the replication graph of Unreal is the replication tick in general, not just the replication graph, is single-threaded. And that's because the engine in general is single-threaded. Now, what does that mean? What does single-threaded mean? it means that all the processing happens in one core of the CPU. And we can move on to the next slide, by the way. But that means that even though the server might have 4 cores, all the other 3 cores are going to stand there and wait for the first thread to do all the processing. This is done normally in Unreal because it was not designed to be multi-threaded. It is a very single-threaded engine, and replication is probably the most single-threaded system out of all the systems in Unreal. So making it multi-threaded is incredibly difficult, and at least I am not aware of it being done before. I tried to do some research around it at the time, and everyone was saying basically that it's impossible. But we did it anyway. We persevered through, and we multi-threaded the Unreal replication tech. And well, looking at the results, they did not disappoint. We actually gained, and there's a graph showing it on the next slide, but we gained a 2.5 times improvement, 2.4 times to be more exact, in our replication ticks.
Huge.
Yeah, it was a really, really big improvement in our replication, and it's probably necessary to achieve the player counts that we're targeting for. I don't think it would be possible without doing this. And the really important thing to note about this optimization and why it's like such a big deal compared to like the 5 times improvement we saw before from Dormancy is that this improvement helps equally even on the worst case scenario. The other ones in the worst case scenario, they're helpful, but they're not that helpful. This is incredibly important even on the worst case scenario. And if we add it on all the other improvements we've done so far, we've actually achieved a total improvement of total reduction on our replication tick by 94%. So we are only at 6% of the original cost for replication. This was actually a huge win for our team. But there's still many more things that need to be done. Ashes of Creation is an incredibly ambitious MMO in terms of scale, and we need to do a lot of work in order to hit our goals.
And you know, this is obviously, again, going back to the start of this whole conversation. What is Ashes of Creation trying to be, and what does it then require of the tech stack we are using in order to become that? And when we said in 2017 that we are looking to bring massive back to massively multiplayer, having an engine with the graphical fidelity, the front end that Unreal provides is so important to the immersive nature, to the beauty of the world, to, you know, the quality of the setting, but then coupled with a proprietary back end that can facilitate the same player experience that a massively multiplayer world wants to provide. That's the dream. That is what Ashes is trying to be.
Exactly.
Phenomenal work here, guys.
Yeah,
I mean, this is huge.
Yeah. I'd like to take a moment, I guess, to shout out the team. The team has done an incredible job. You know, we are pushing MMO tech to where it's never gone, and we intend to keep doing this moving forward. Hunter, Alex, Kevin, Andrew, Anton, Adam, Ish, Doug, you know, they've all done amazing work, you know, to get us to this point where we're at today, and I'm sure they'll keep doing it moving forward. If you're interested in working on problems like this, you know, send us an application. You know, we're always looking for people who want to work on this, who have experience working on tech like this. please send us an application. We're always interested.
And we know that like this showcase, this tech talk, this TED talk, this GDC talk, you know, whatever we want to apply to this in-depth technical discussion is going to appeal not just to people who are aspiring, obviously, within this field to learn it, to do it, to, you know, this is their career going forward, but also to those of you who have been within this field of work and who yearn to work on the types of problems that we're discussing here in this showcase. We have a phenomenal culture at Intrepid. We have a phenomenal project in our hands that is, you know, no shortage of problems that need to be solved. And one thing that our community has done a phenomenal job with is helping to evangelize the project and the company. And we're here to say that we have apps open. We have positions that are available. And if you want to be a part of this team, or if you want to help others find this team so that they can apply, please share this link, share this video with others. Go on, you know, social media and let people know we're working on some pretty next generation tech that is going to change the face of massively multiplayer when it comes to a genre. So, you know, very excited and proud of what your team has accomplished. You guys, I know, are working every single day and doing a phenomenal job. Congratulations, just very well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's great to experience it in game too. And I know that, you know, our PI folks have already experienced that in our Node Wars test as well. So maybe they didn't even realize it.
Might have not.
Yeah, they might not have noticed, but there were definitely server workers working hard in that, and we were capturing data. So we super duper appreciate it. And as we head into Alpha 2, we're only going to get more data and be able to continue to push on. And as the folks here have stated, moving towards more of that dynamic state.
Yeah, it's been in progress. It's going to be in progress still for many years as we continually find new ways to advance it and make it better. We're committed to providing kind of like that quality we want for our players. And as a lot of us have played MMOs in the past, we just like networking was the big stopper for a lot of things. And we're trying to do something different and trying to make that a better experience for not only our game, but many more games to come. If other companies were able to like wanting to adapt to a new tech style or try to figure out their networking issues.
Yeah, and of course, all of us here are huge MMO fans, and I know those of you who are watching are as well, obviously, if you're sitting through this. But of course, the plan for us is to continue to create an amazing game and push forward and continue to change things even after post-launch. We'll continue to try to drive things forward. So thank you for joining us, and thank you to Hunter and Zach and Anton for your time and putting together an amazing deck. A little extra shout out to Mike for putting together all the graphics.
Mike did such a good job.
And
Kyle
Kyle for helping capture some of the little footage pieces to make sure that they looked great. We super appreciate it. Any final words, Stephen, to wrap things up?
Yeah, absolutely. Just, you know, out in the community, let us know. You know, these are always the more risky takes that we provide insights to in our monthly updates because they are so tech heavy. And, you know, we know that this has an appeal to perhaps a smaller audience, but give us your feedback. Give us your thoughts. What did you think of this presentation? How do you enjoy, you know, learning a little bit more in-depth under the hood conversation about what it takes to make these types of games, to make, you know, Ashes of Creation, that dream of all of ours? How does it appeal to you? What are your questions? What are your thoughts? Leave us comments in the YouTube channel, on Twitter and different social medias and Discord and on our forums. Obviously, the community team continues to do a bang up job of collecting your insights and bringing it back to the team. But we enjoy, you know, sharing this and giving our perhaps more sheltered developers who are in the behind the scenes making all the magic and everything work an opportunity to come out and talk about how they are literally the magic that makes the wheels turn for this bus. And it's a great opportunity, I think, for them to come out, see a little daylight and bask in the sun of what is the glory that our community looks to them and says, thank you for providing an opportunity to enjoy a game at this scale, because it would not be possible, obviously, without your guys' hard work. And so with that, I think we'll see you guys back on stream.
We'll see you on the flip side. Welcome back, everyone. We'll play the video in the background so you have something visually to watch while we discuss some things. But of course, we do grab a few questions from the chat. Most of them, I feel like a lot of your questions we answered throughout later in the deck. But it seems like you guys liked the presentation. So again, Mike, thank you for putting that together, and for Hunter, Anton, and Zach for putting together such an amazing, very thorough explanation of the things that we're working on technology-wise. But with that comes some information that we want to share with you guys. Of course, we always like to be transparent. We like to give you guys a heads up on what's coming and what we're doing. And one of the things is that with this technology, you know, we had stated previously that we weren't going to expand. We closed down our Alpha 2 packs for a reason. And that reason was we wanted to make sure that we could service all the users that we had. One of the things that we really want to make sure of is that no matter who we have joining us, that they're going to have a good experience. Obviously, alphas and alpha, things are going to be buggy. This is not a game. We've always continually said that it's going to be a testing phase. But with that, we still want it to be a decent experience for those of you who join us. And because of this amazing technology that these guys have been working on, we can now service more users, which means that we will be opening up Alpha 2 key access sales in the near future as we get closer to Alpha 2 or along with Alpha 2. So kind of stay tuned for that. We do want to make sure that folks are aware of that, but some caveats. These will not be pre-order packs. These will be key access. So these will be, you know, to access the product once it's available. And then of course the pricing is still TBD, but we're going to try to make sure it's fair as possible, especially for those of you who have already purchased packages. We understand that you're like, hey, I purchased a package. We want to make sure that that price is comparable. So Stephen and I have gone back and forth, and we'll make sure that it is fair for you guys.
And they will not be, when we do release the access to they will not be additional rotating cosmetics either. So these will be static key access that players will have an opportunity to purchase in and access Alpha 2 and participate, because ultimately Alpha 2's purpose is to test the game. And more players testing the game is better. We wanted, as Margaret said, be sure that the tech that we're utilizing for Alpha 2 is capable of facilitating that. That dynamic server gridding. And by the way, watching the commentary, watching the feedback during the discussion was interesting. There's a lot of people who I didn't expect were going to be really interested in the conversation. And it seemed like, you know, I was watching the viewership was staying still around, you know, what it was. I was like, okay, this is better than I expected.
We knew not everybody's going to be interested, and we try to be set expectations. Like, we've made it very clear that this is what we're going to be talking about for like a month now. So hopefully everyone was prepared. We tried to like make sure our social copy was like, hey, it's going to get nerdy. We're going to talk a lot of tech. So, you know, if that's not your thing, that's okay. It definitely did. We could have got more nerdy, I feel like. Yes. But also I wanted to note that the upgrade packs for the previously purchased packs are still going to be available. So if you already purchased a pre-order pack, those upgrades are still available to you as well. So those aren't going away. At some point, obviously, Alpha 2 keys will go away, and of course, those upgrade packs will go away, but those will be closer to the end of Alpha 2. And Alpha 2 is meant to be a much longer running testing phase for us, and we'll be having updates that will be coming frequently for those, bug fixes that will be coming frequently for those. So in the persistence wise of aspect of it, because I think that is something that needs to be set, because people have different understanding of what persistence means. We will have times where the servers do go down so that we can do updates, so that we can check things and make sure things are good. Our goal is to not have to wipe, but obviously if there are situations where we have to, we will do that. But persistency is the main goal for us. We want to get all that data that we possibly can when it comes to persistence.
Absolutely.
That's not it. We also have another announcement of an announcement.
Another announcement. I think people will like this one, though. That's
yeah,
okay.
You think so? I think some people will like it and some people won't. So We are also going to start expanding our NDA testing. Obviously, we've been working with PI. You guys have known that. We've kept them pretty NDA'd. We did uncover the vocal NDA in regards to the NodeWars spot testing, but obviously we're doing other testing.
And by
with
the way,
them.
that's been a lot of fun to watch, and I'm very
Oh,
encouraged
gosh.
to continue doing that as part of additional testing going forward, because it's been great to see our test groups go out and sit on different content creators' platforms and talk about what their experiences were, and allow, more than just us as an interface to, what development is looking like right now, what the game state is looking like right now. So I'm very encouraged by those interactions. I think we have a phenomenal content creator team group out there that is following the game, who are, servicing a lot of different viewers and communities who want to learn about what's happening. They have great channels to go to and do that. And you guys are choosing great guests and having really good conversations. So kudos to you guys.
As a tangent, because you brought that up,
Mhm.
we are going to be putting up a role for a content creator relations manager, and as soon as we fill that role, you'll be starting to see some of those that program starting to come online. So just, that's very exciting for us. We have so many applicants who have come in, and one of the things that Stephen and I had discussed is that we really want our content creator program to be a very interactive thing. You are part of like our family, so we want to help you. You help us. It's going to be a mutual thing. It's not going to be like a program that you've seen before. And we did, provide a little bit of an outline of what that program looks like, and a lot of people were pretty excited about it. But the bigger you grow, the bigger we grow. So we want to help you just as much as you help us. And we aren't looking at just big content creators. We're looking for really just quality content creators who are consistent. So you could have 200 followers, you could have 200,000. So it just, to us, that's not what we're looking for. What we're looking at is we're really watching all your content. We're looking at all
Effort,
your
passion.
social. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
Which is very time consuming. And we've already started funneling through some of that stuff and looking through it. But obviously, once we fill that role, that's going to be the person who's going to help us manage it, because it's going to be a full-time job. We might need more people than just one. But to go back to the announcement of the announcement, we obviously have PI joining us and testing, but we need more testers. So we are going to be starting to expand that. We're going to do a slow roll of what that expansion looks like. And so for these initial testing, we are going to be starting to add some of the Alpha 1 users. Now, how we're going to pick that, I know that's going to be a big contentious thing, but we are definitely going to do our best. And so the first thing that we want to do is, for this first round, is we're going to add the top 500 from the Alpha 1 contributors. So that is looking at people who actually participated in game in Alpha 1. We're going to be grabbing those users, and then we're going to have another 500 that will be randomly chosen. And you guys will all be emailed. The goal is to email you within this July timeframe, and you'll be joining us in testing like soon.
And this is this approach of invitation to randomize, but also activity. Like, we know all the people who participated in Alpha 1, what they did, the statistics around how often they played, what level they got to, the amount of time that they played, and the detail they spent in their forum accounts and their notes and response. Like, those are our dedicated testers from the Alpha 1
Yeah.
group. So we want to give
We
them
want
a
them
first
back.
stab. Exactly. We want them
Yeah.
we want them back first stab as we begin to expand outside of the P1 group, excuse me, I'm sorry, outside of the PI group into Alpha 1 testers over the month of July, and then into August as we expand that to include many more Alpha 1
And
testers,
hopefully all of them.
all of the Alpha 1 testers eventually, right? Before A2. So this is just how we start to ramp that up in the first stages.
And that's just ensuring that, we give you guys a decent experience as we move forward. And that's not to say that you won't run into bugs, not to say that we won't have some client performance issues or whatnot, but like, we are going to be testing a lot of bigger pieces, and we're for a little longer test runs. Obviously, these will be all under NDA. There may be cases where we unlock some of that vocal NDA, like we have stated before. We might unlock some images that people take, like screenshots. We let them screenshot, but only within our like private channels. Obviously, not externally. But yeah, so we're excited. We're excited to
That's
expand
very
the
exciting
testing.
news.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
And, obviously I know that runs into folks asking other things about Alpha 2, but I will let Brian talk a little bit about that when he goes into studio update. I do have some questions that we do want to answer in regards to server meshing technology. So I'm going to
Sure.
reel us back in, but that was relevant to it.
I'll try my best. I am cracking my technical brain skills. Let's go.
I think Brian said earlier, he was like, I think I got smarter after watching that.
Yeah, I did.
All right. So our first question here
That's
is,
funny.
what is your plan and what systems are in place to avoid the first few months of server queues, congestion, and when players drop off? How do you plan on handling that if/when the time comes?
Sure. That I think that obviously is a problem that every MMO launch suffers, right? I mean, that is, the balance between your active users, your expected peak concurrencies, right? Where that fall off begins and how you consolidate servers. You don't want to expand too much at the beginning to alleviate server queues and then end up with like 30% pop servers that you have to consolidate later. The same is going to be true for Alpha 2, right? And so we're going to be leveraging, obviously, we know how many users we have available when it comes to Alpha 2 entrance. And then as we allow additional people to purchase in with these new key sales that we'll be doing later, we're going to get an idea of what that is. Generally, I would expect we're going to see 30 to 40% peak concurrencies when it comes to like opening the servers, when it comes to prime time, when it comes to events that happen, right? And so when we talk about server queuing and the server congestion, we want to make sure that we have healthy Alpha 2 servers. So we're going to leverage server queuing as much as possible. That means that sometime those server queues might get into the thousands during those peak times, during the servers spinning up or during those prime times or events. And that's okay. It's not going to be the most fun for a lot of players to have to sit in a queue. Obviously, we've all done that before in MMOs that we played. But the alternative is that we have too many servers available. We don't have those queues during peak times. And then when it's not peak times, those server populations dilapidate. And that's not what we want to have, obviously.
But we'll have live operations watching those, making sure
Absolutely.
we're looking at the health of our realms. For this case, we'll say realms because servers mean a different thing and it can get confusing. So we'll make sure that we have enough realms to accommodate for the users
That's
that we
correct.
expect.
And we are able to spin up new realms at a moment's notice, right? So as we
within
watch,
reason.
well,
Not
at
a snap of the finger,
at a
but-
DevOps moment's
Yeah.
notice. Yeah.
I just want to, I want to say that because like when we said it before, the guys were like, they're like, we can do it quickly, but not like a snap.
And I mean, generally you have a new realm on standby, right? That's spooled up and ready to go, and you need to pull the trigger on it or not.
We just don't unlock the tags for you guys to be able to get in. So we have those those ready. We
That's
just don't unlock them for you, but it's easy for us to do. All right. Then the next one here is there a higher likelihood for bugs or server hiccups near the edges of servers? And during testing of this meshing, have there been issues surrounding item duplication, server, hiccups back and forth between travel on these server borders? So like a lot of people had questions regarding this because people are worried about speed hackers and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, around these borders, and especially early on, as we rolled out this multi-grid formation, we're looking for bugs when it comes to server authority transfers, when it comes to these proxies across boundaries, all those types of things. However, these days, not so much, right? Because we've been spending the last 9-10 months or so, the networking team, around identifying those bugs across border issues.
We started with a 1x1, and then we did a 2x2, 3x2, 4x3. So like we've been scaling it up and testing. And we found bugs before.
That's right. But what you say about, as we kind of enter into Alpha 2 and as we continue to expand our testing to include now additional real clients, that is where the networking team obviously focuses on. They watch those things, they get reports and profiles around where those errors can occur, and they address them as necessary.
All right. The next one is, does Intrepid currently have a plan on how to accomplish dynamic gridding, or is it just we want it but don't know how? We talked about it. So
right now dynamic gridding is in place. Right now what we are doing is we are optimizing, fixing performance around that. And the current goal, which is on target, is that dynamic gridding will be online by the start of Alpha 2. So, all of our tech was built to get to the point where we can do dynamic gridding. This has always been the end goal overall. So dynamic gridding is still in active development right now, but the plan is that by Alpha 2 entrance criteria, we will have dynamic gridding in a bug sturdy place that is optimized and working as we need it.
Right. And how does the longevity of servers speak to the relevancy problem? It is eventually going to be non-financially viable, in this person's opinion, to maintain that amount of server farm space to keep the performance optimal. I had to put that in there because
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about infrastructure, right? There's a duality in modern day times between what's available in the cloud, and there's business relationships that get formed between cloud providers like an AWS or a GCP, where you can have reserved instances available. You want to optimize your server types and machine configurations that are necessary so that costs are not prohibitive against the number of expected users per instance that it can facilitate. And we run all of those projections. We have that regularly, that we are optimizing also the types of machine uses that we require. And that's from a cloud perspective. Now, when it comes to testing, especially for Alpha 2, we'll be heavily leveraging cloud instances in order to provide the types of infrastructure that we require, because it's easily scalable and we can flex into that relatively in an on-demand fashion. However, as we move towards a proper launch scenario, we will have bare metal that we service ourselves from a service center perspective, that we utilize, and still have the ability to flex into the cloud when we need to flex for numbers that we didn't account for popularity we didn't account for. That is the finesse of these types of systems, and how we are agnostic of whether or not we deploy our clusters in a bare metal service or in the cloud, where we can do either or. So for us, everything we do to calculate cost per user is associated with how we're optimizing for the types of instances that we can use. And for Alpha 2, that's looking pretty good.
Yeah. So we're not concerned on the financial side of things. I think everyone always asks those type of questions, but I figure making sure
They're
that
great
we address
questions.
Yep.
because a lot of people were like,
questions.
"That's a good question about that." So I'm like, "I'll add
Yeah,
it to there."
We
absolutely.
talk about this stuff regularly all the
I
time.
know.
Yeah.
Brian and I are reviewing projections and spreadsheets that he's putting together
Yep.
every day almost. So
It's-
yeah, absolutely.
It's the stuff we have to do. I mean, I think similarly to the tech side of things, the financial side of stuff, people, it's not the stuff that you get to see a lot of, right? So,
Yeah.
and we've been pretty transparent about where we're at, what we're doing, how we're moving forward in regards to that.
Now, don't get me wrong. Let me give some context here, because I think it's interesting for those who in the audience who enjoy more of the business side of things. There have been times in the past at our company, and other companies do this, where running a test is exorbitantly too costful, right? However, you need to take that bite in order to collect certain information, even if you're not in a state where you're fully optimized, in order for that to be long-term sustainable. We've done that in the past, and we knew the price we were paying in order to do that. Alpha 2 is not one of those scenarios. So just to be clear.
All right. And of course, that was our server meshing technology. We hope that folks enjoyed it. The video for that will be uploaded after the end of this live stream, so you can go check it out, relive it, go back to where you want, read things, look at stuff, because I know there were people who were peeking at some assets and stuff like that they were excited about when we were showcasing 3D models in there. But of course, we do have a feedback thread up over on our forums. So if you do have any thoughts or questions, or any answers to some of the questions that Stephen had asked, both in there and then previous before we started the segment, feel free to head on over there and give us your thoughts. We are constantly reading those. We're putting reports together for our dev team. And if we see any additional questions that we feel need to be answered, we'll make sure that we get those answered in future updates. And with that, I'm going to hand it actually over to Langford to do our studio update.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did feel smarter after watching that. It was incredible. And Stephen, you're right. I think I might go try to get my engineering degree now.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. I'm curious how many people, are interested in that, don't have the opportunity to
Here's the
associate.
thing. Are you interested? Post a 1 in chat. If you're live on Twitch, and if you're watching
There
this
you
on
go.
YouTube, you can put
There
a
you
little
go.
1 emoji
Perfect.
in your comment.
But it's one thing to listen to a lecture, to take a class, or to GDC talk, where the substance of the conversation is related to particular uh, knowledge you want to gain. It's another thing to have the substance, also the interest of the project coupled, right? Like it's great to be, I think, a fan who's interested in the tech side of this, or who's a software developer, or who's working in Unreal and trying to build their first game or whatever, following a project they care about from a gamer's perspective, and now get to couple that with their interest from a technology
Look, if
perspective
you're looking
as well.
for work, we're
heck yeah.
hiring. Just
Mhm.
get out there. But go ahead,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Langford.
Oh
I know
no,
you
that's
got a
cool.
list
Yeah,
of
because we're
things you got to
we're
go
gonna
cover.
yeah, I do have a list of things I'd like to cover, but hiring's on that. Yeah, so what they said in the video today was that the stuff is going to be, and as Stephen recapped, the stuff's going to be available coming to Alpha 2 for the dynamic gridding stuff. And I think the first thing to note is that the studio in general, the fires of production are hot.
Yes.
There's the plumes of smoke are rising from the forges, and we are definitely speeding towards Alpha 2. So just to reiterate, I think off of what we said last live stream, we are still entirely confident in our plan for a Q3 Alpha 2.
That's right.
So
And we're
we,
planning to announce a date.
yeah, that's
at
what I was
the-
gonna say.
Yeah, go for
We're
it.
not quite ready to put the date out there yet, but I think by next live stream,
Yes.
I'll have enough road mapping done with the team, and we'll know for sure.
Yeah, the end of this
So
month, expect to get a date for A2 start. And actually, from a production standpoint, many people, obviously don't know. We've talked in the past about how production runs, but we just finished a major milestone.
yes, we did. We talked about that a little last time too. Milestone 9.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Are
go
you want
ahead.
to give some stats on it?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, cool. So we just finished milestone 9. So as a company, I don't know how familiar the audience is with our Scrum stuff and what story points really means, but we completed 8,900 story points. That's like a measure of time and risk. And that's quite a vast number to complete in a
Yes.
milestone. We were about 89% successful to our own estimations, which is pretty darn good. But of course, anything that can get in the way does. And we have meetings every day to look at disruptors and top 5 criticals and blockers and stuff like that.
And just to give context, 89% delivery on the product goals for a particular milestone, given that a milestone is looking out roughly 3 months ahead, is pretty darn good, right? And people might wonder, well, why wasn't it 100%, right? The things that can happen during a milestone, whether it be, emergent work that was unexpected, that might be Sev-Zero work for, build breakers
And we
or
found
test
a
blockers,
memory crash or something
memory
like that.
stomps or crashes, right? Discovery of new work or estimations didn't take into account like unknowns within a particular piece of code. Like all of those can come in to kind of disrupt what an end goal is for delivery on a milestone. And 89% is pretty up there.
Yeah, I was really quite proud of the team. It was really
Absolutely.
good. And bugs, right? Squash them.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of how far we got along in milestone 9. We're about to kick off our milestone 10 here.
Technically, it starts today.
Yeah,
we have a town hall in about 2 hours.
Yeah.
That's
Or
right.
hour and a half.
That's right. So we're, I think we've already identified some of this stuff too, but we're going to continue looking at polishing for our VFX and our UI elements. We're going to continue looking at the golden path, which we play test regularly, or I think as last month you called it, Stephen, the golden on fire lava ridden tree.
Yeah, that's right.
But we're continuing to play test on a regular basis with that stuff, trying to make sure that it does have a good experience for the player. We are really player driven in what we're trying to accomplish, even though I know it's not a game. I get it.
Yeah.
But it is something that we're trying very hard to keep going. So Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say another huge thing, which I know you're probably about to get to, is we had a 15% staffing growth over the last quarter.
We
Steven's
have
excited.
indeed.
He's taking all of Brian's
I know.
fire.
I'm sorry.
No, it's
I'm
okay.
just excited. I think you know what
I
we
am
had-
too.
Yeah,
I think
we-
we've hired more so far this year than we did in all of last. Like
Yes.
it's been an incredible growth journey for this company. Yeah, I was going to mention a couple other things. We're hammering on economy. We've got our features and gameplay stuff are looking great. We got more to go. We're working on material components, and obviously we're fixing bugs in advance of this Alpha 2 stuff. So I think we're wrapping it up pretty good and getting ready for letting you guys know what that date is.
Mhm.
All right. Well, with
Very
that,
exciting.
I'm going to swap us over to our art update. This is a long stream, so thank you all for so much for sticking with
We've
us.
had 2 long back-to-back
I
streams.
know. So hopefully, you took your potty
And-
breaks.
and this month we're also, I think people are going to be really excited. We can leak perhaps what's coming up this month because it's in stone, isn't it? Margaret just gave me the side eye.
you mean like what the content is that we're going to
Yeah,
cover?
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
We've
for
already
this month,
talked
yeah.
about it, but you go.
Oh,
go
good.
For it, yeah.
Okay, yeah. This month you guys are going to be seeing for the first time at the end of July the Bard archetype, and it
I
is
thought you were
gonna
talking about
be
something else.
exciting. Oh shoot, my bad.
No, Bard is That
Yeah,
I think
Bard
we've already kinda
is up
teased
and
that,
coming.
though.
I
We've-
did tease that a little bit. I
Yeah.
did tease that. Yeah.
And I talked about it a little earlier in the stream too. But
Yes.
maybe we can get Steven to play a guitar for us on stream.
I'm down. Give me
Oh
a
heck yeah!
sitar,
Get
I'm
him a
ready.
lute. A lute.
Get him a
Yes.
lute.
I'm
A
ready.
All
yeah.
right. We'll
Shillelagh.
just go through some art here really quickly. We've got these amazing silken web hand wraps that were made by Chris, and a studded leather belt. Studded silver belt. Sorry, not leather. It's the upgrade from the leather belt. This is still a work in progress, I believe, but you kind of get to see some of it. And then this is the Grove Guard helmet.
Love that.
Yeah, it's looking
Mm.
cool.
It's creepy.
And then we have the robe of the financier. Financier? I don't know if you're saying it.
Financier.
Financier.
Very rich.
Yes. They got the gold in there. Blues.
Loving the folds and the cloth. Looking good.
Yeah, those were by Danny, the helmet and the robe. And then Jinsey worked on this cloak of ill omens. Jacob, our lead producer, was saying he wants a version of this with the hood
A
up.
hood up. Yeah.
Mm,
But it's very
That's
cool.
cool.
And then we've got this awesome bat. I love it. It's like a bullfrog and a bat together. I'm so into it. So cute.
It is cool. I like its little neck. Or
Yeah.
big neck.
It's not a little neck. And then the last one here is the Rosarium Guard. I think I have a turntable for this one as well.
That looks uncomfortable.
It looks uncomfortable.
Yeah, I've been watching I was watching House of Dragons, and they had some really good armor in this last episode. And it moved really well with the shoulders, but I'm looking at this thing and I'm like, oh, I don't know if I could move that well now.
It's got the built-in
I'll let
beard
you know.
scratcher right
I
here.
know the beard scratcher.
Armor chafing is awful. As a cosplayer, I have made so many pieces of armor. One of the things that I've learned is like you always want to put like fur underneath there or cushions, because like anywhere where you're like moving your joints, it's like really awful.
Yeah,
And,
avoid
like,
those edges.
Yeah, leather, and like if you're actually wearing like heavy armor, it's if you make it out of foam and stuff, it's not as bad. And that is our art update. So
Beautiful.
into the last segment here, and I'll just play some of the slides in the background so you have something visual to look at whilst we go through our Q&A. These are the questions from the forums, and the first one here is from Phantom X, and they would like to know about war commissions.
I thought it was Fant MX.
Phantom, I don't know.
I'm just kidding.
X,
I
yeah.
called him Fant MX one time, and he didn't hear the end of it. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Wagner put it in quotes, Phantom X, to make it clear, to make sure.
Okay.
But Phantom, you can let us know how you prefer it, or maybe
It's
Steven will just
definitely
keep trolling
Phantom
you.
X. I'm just trolling him.
Maybe Steven will keep trolling you. This question's about war commissions. We know that non-citizens can complete mayoral commissions, but does that include those that will start a node war? In other words, could non-citizens do the commission required to start a war, even if citizens deliberately don't complete them?
That's something that I think we are still leaving undetermined. On a design side, it can go either way. It's a flag that a designer can set that either requires it to be citizen only or non-citizen as well. It's something we're going to test. My inclination is that for certain types of node actions that grant the mayor certain node powers, that we will expect only citizen participation at a certain threshold, but it's something that obviously we're going to be testing in A2.
And then Castai wants to know about threat generation. Of taunts, heals, and damage done, each of equal output performed against enemy mobs, will they all generate a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio of threat generation, or will one of those three be slightly better or worse than the other two at producing hate?
Right now, the formula includes modifiers. So we can apply a modifier as we wish to either healing values versus hate values. Those things are going to just kind of be balanced as we kind of see playtesting continue to see, what's the right blend between the tank holding aggro, the healer not pulling it too often, and the DPS not grabbing it as well. So we want to have maximum flexibility in the formula, and that's why modifiers exist there.
All right. And then Kadak wants to know about open sea content. Will there be points of interest such as underwater dungeons that will also remain outside of the flagging system in the open sea, or will those be contested?
That's a very good question. Right now, the expectation should be that those will remain contested. And in the event where we do not want to have, let's say certain content contested, we would likely have some type of doorway or shared instance opening that players then can move into where it is an uncontested
An underwater bubble.
area. Exactly.
Chronix wants to know about UI and UX tools. What tools can we expect for shot callers regarding marks and pings? This is a big one that we've gotten asked a lot about.
Maximum tools, because the people making this game want the exact same thing you do.
I think I brought this up in Pult the other day. I was like, I know we have a lot on our plate for Alpha 2, but could we just make like one thing where I can put an icon on one person's head? And they were like, okay, we'll try. We'll see what we can do.
That is in their backlog for
pre-A2
2 entrance. So it's still outstanding work.
I know they have a long list of them. I was just like, just give me one like now.
Absolutely.
Our next comment here is from Top Wombat, which I love that name. Server, they want to know about server tech, which is very fitting for today's stream. Will mobs respawn faster if there are a lot of players in an area?
So yeah, that's the spawner system. The spawner system has a number of ways that it can respawn. This is it can be a set value that's time based. It can be predicated on monster count. So as monster count drops beneath a threshold, the spawner will spawn additional monsters. The world designers have all that flexibility at their disposal. It just kind of depends on the area, the quest type that the mob is servicing. We have all of that functionality, and it just, it's something we're going to be testing.
All right. And then Zilfarth wants to know about Character Creator. Will we be able to upload an image into the Character Creator and have it render that character for us? We've had a lot of people asking this, actually.
Yeah, not for Alpha 2, but it is something that I know Clayton is excited about trying. And it is something that we're going to discuss as a feature for the Character Creator post A2 launch, but not for the entrance of A2.
And since we're talking about Character Creator, we did have a lot of people asking, like, when will we get access to Character Creator? Because we have said
close.
The goal is to put that out before Alpha 2 so people can get their hands on it.
It is getting close. I just saw an update last week from the Character Creator for the stable environment, which is basically as you create your characters.
Yeah.
It's looking pretty
It's
good.
looking good, yeah.
We need to get it over the finish line on the outstanding polish work that's necessary there.
You can make some whack characters right now.
Yes, it's getting close.
I think you could, like, at one point we were able to, like, combine some of the races. It looked like a little bit of a mess, but they're fixing it. They're working on it. Snow Elf wants to know about server meshing tech. Will server meshing have any impact on the world bosses or events? And is there any potential chance for exploitation from the player base in bypassing the spawn timers via this concept?
No, I wouldn't say there's really any correlation between, exploiting or respawn timers. Will it have any implications for boss tech? Absolutely. I mean, as we just observed, right, when you talk about certain emergent behaviors, whether it be raids coming together to contest a particular boss fight, the server meshing tech, along with our dynamic gridding, is now going to be capable of essentially, reducing the scope of a particular server's authority and spinning up new servers to add to the grid to facilitate that high player density, right? That's one of the benefits that server meshing tech and what the networking team has been working on helps to facilitate as our design goals, which is high player density. So yes,
Which
it
world
benefits it.
bosses bring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So to answer that question, yes, there are going to be benefits there. That's what A2 entrance will contain as part of our networking technology. That's what our networking teams have been working on for the past several years.
But no to the exploitation part of that.
No, yeah. No, there's not really any considerations from a server meshing technology standpoint that would assist in exploitation or problems there. Obviously, like any networking layer, there are bugs that we need to hammer out. There's going to be, issues that testing will give us insight to, but that would be the
And
same.
it's already
for...
started giving us data on
Absolutely.
it. So it's
Oh,
been
yeah,
great
absolutely.
having testers. Tyranthraxis wants to know about Underrealm content. Will there be underwater content in the Underrealm parts of the game?
Yeah, Underrealm will have water associated with it, and there may be areas where we we leverage underwater content as either a means of traversal to reach certain locations, or require use of certain vehicle types in order to traverse.
And our penultimate
or mounts.
question is from Roni Scaponi. I always love saying their name. Profession choices. Will your own profession have any effect besides a social one on which tradable recipes and blueprints you obtain? I talked to Vacnar a little bit more about this, and I think the example here is, will I still obtain and loot recipes that are not my own profession, and can I trade these
Yes.
with others?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. It is an
And-
open market economy. The concept here is that you don't need to do everything yourself per se. Other people can do them, and you can excel in a different area in order to make trades with them, in order to purchase from them. That is the basis of a healthy economy.
Yeah, we want you guys to be trading things and needing things from other people. That's the whole point of an MMO.
Absolutely.
And then our final question here is from Lashing, wanting to know about stamina modification. Will there be specific stats on gear outside of set bonuses that modify or interact with stamina, such as increased maximum stamina, stamina regeneration, or stamina gain on basic attack hits?
Yeah, so first and foremost, stamina is a waterfall, which means it does get influenced by certain core ability stats. However, in addition to that trickle down benefit that will come from certain set bonuses that might modify constitution, which could increase, regeneration rate of stamina, you will also have independent one-off stamina benefits like, 10% stamina regen. That is just a set bonus, or 15% higher stamina value cap, that gets applied to certain sets and or armors and
Right.
buffs as well.
And that wraps us up for our June development update. Again, thank you all so much for sticking with us. As final reminders, head on over to our forums, leave us your feedback, forums.ashesofcreation.com. And of course, we will be opening up A2 key sales as we get closer to Alpha 2, so stay tuned for that. And we will be expanding our NDA testing. So for those of you who do get access in, we will be emailing you sometime this month, so stay tuned for that. That will be under NDA testing, so you can't talk about it. It's like, Fight Club. But it will be exciting, and we'll be expanding that to all of our A1 users as we move forward. Thank you to the wonderful server technology. So big, huge shout out to Zach, Hunter, Anton for putting together an amazing presentation and walking us through some big brain stuff. But hopefully that was entertaining for you guys. I know it's a lot different than the showcasing gameplay, but don't worry, there's going to be a lot of gameplay gameplay next month. So, or not next month, this month, later this month.
Later this month.
So you won't miss out on that. We'll definitely be sharing more of that. And of course, thank you to Brian and Steven for joining us. And we'll have the video up over on YouTube really in a moment here. So stay tuned for that. We'll post it on all of our social channels. Follow us on all of our social channels. We are Ashes of Creation in all the places. We post at least like once or twice a day almost. We try to keep you abreast to what's going on. We ask a lot of questions of you. Sometimes they affect in-game. I think one time we asked you if you prefer B for bag or I for inventory, and we actually, based on the votes, we changed it in-game. So
Heck
there's a lot
yeah.
of things where like you can just be part of the development process and follow along with our journey. And of course, note that the full development update video for this one won't be going out tomorrow. It'll be going up July 5th because tomorrow's a holiday. I would like to not have to work. So we'll be pushing that to the 5th. And of course, if you want to be spotlighted on our next one, leave a comment there. Make sure you subscribe to our channel whenever that goes up on the 5th. And we will see you all later this month. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Bye.
Awesome.
Bye,
Thanks, everybody.
guys.
Bye.
Bye.